All right, now I will reshare my screen. Okay, great. Can you see it okay?
Perfect. Yep, I can see it. So we will go ahead and get started. Um, Hi everyone. Thank you so much for joining UConn Tab's webinar today. My name is Katie Malgiolio. I'm the Community Engagement Manager for UConn Tab. My background is in social work, and I'm joined today by Nilab. Nilab, if you want to introduce yourself and Mira.
Hi, everybody. Thank you again for joining us today. My name is Nilab, as Katie mentioned. I work with the New England Rural Health Association, and we are the Rural Outreach and Engagement Partner with UConn Tab's program. We've been working with them for about a year and a half, 2 years now, supporting various outreach and programming across rural New England.
Great, thank you so much. So today's webinar is on best practices for communicating grant progress and updates. We know funding announcements will be made relatively soon, hopefully in a month or so. So this presentation is designed to assist any entities that currently have funding or are hopeful to receive funding either this grant cycle or another in the future. Go to the next slide. So this is our agenda today. We'll be doing a very brief introduction to UConn Tab, identifying the various types of Brownfields funding, and then going into some more detail on the actual communication of process and progress for grant updates. So discussing the development of a communication plan, identifying community partners, clearly establishing points of contact, plain language, and more that we'll get into soon. So these first few slides may be a bit repetitive for those who attended our last webinar or any of our previous webinars, but just to reintroduce ourselves and our work for anyone who's new here, UConn Tab stands for Technical Assistance to Brownfields. So as our title suggests, we provide technical assistance to towns, cities, states, tribes, nonprofits, and other public entities, that are facing brownfields issues. Our services are free of charge, and our program is funded by the Environmental Protection Agency, or the US EPA. We do operate out of the University of Connecticut, but we serve all 6 New England states and provide a wide variety of different technical support, including grant support. So we often assist in grant review and grant prep, but today's webinar will focus on what happens after municipalities receive funding and how to meaningfully communicate important grant information to community members. This is UConn Tab's community engagement team and a little infographic just showing some of the community engagement services that we offer. So the community engagement team is comprised of our executive director, Randy, myself, and then Nilab from the New England Rural Health Association. So our services are split into 4 main categories that you can see here, including tools and guides, public meetings and presentations, online engagement and social media support, and advocacy work for anti-displacement, affordable housing, environmental health. A lot of these resources, particularly the public meetings and online engagement, are great ways to keep people informed and involved once Brownfields funding is secured and projects begin. So we'll talk more about that and how UConn Tab can help support your efforts throughout the presentation today.
Awesome. Thanks, Katie. So when we talk about Brownfields funding, it's important to understand that support comes from both federal and state level. At the federal level, the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency, EPA, offers several key types of Brownfields grants. Assessment grants are often the first step. They help communities identify whether contamination exists and what type of cleanup might be needed. Cleanup grants then help move those projects into remediation and eventual reuse. There are also multi-purpose grants, which provide flexibility across different stages of a project, and revolving loan fund program, which allows communities to provide loans and subgrants that can be reused over time as funds are repaid. In addition to federal funding, many states also operate their own brownfields programs. These vary widely, but often provide important support like supplemental funding, technical assistance, or incentives to encourage redevelopment. In some cases, state programs can help fill in gaps where federal funding doesn't fully cover. Understanding how these pieces work together is key to successfully planning and communicating brownfields projects. So when discussing communicating grant progress, one of the biggest challenges is that progress isn't always visible from the outside. A lot of the work, like site assessments, testing, planning, happens in phases that don't always look like change to the community. At the same time, the information itself can evolve. You might uncover a new contamination, experience delays, or need to adjust your approach. From a community's perspective, that can feel confusing or even concerning if it's not clearly explained. And that's where communication plays a critical role. It helps bridge the gap between what's happening within the project and what the community understands about it. It's not just about sharing updates, it's making sure that those updates are meaningful, clear, and connected to what people really do care about.
Great, thank you, Neela. Um, so the first step towards successful communication is preparation and planning. And in this context, that could look like creating a communication plan. So a communication plan might look different in every community, but the main ideas are just setting achievable goals, identifying target audiences, considering key messaging, determining most impactful communication methods, putting together a timeline, and assigning roles and responsibilities. A communication plan helps municipalities be more organized and intentional throughout an entire funding period. So, avoiding community pushback, confusion, or negative reactions that Neela was kind of speaking to. Um, Communication plans don't have to be complicated, but they should answer a few key questions. Who are you trying to reach? What are you trying to communicate? How are you going to communicate it? And when and how often will you share updates? So at UConn Tab, we have our community engagement plans that we utilize when partnering on community engagement efforts. These can be a really helpful free resource for any entities looking for a little extra support in the development or implementation of a communication plan like this. And so next is identifying community partners. Community partners are essential to effective communication, engagement, and outreach. A helpful question to ask when identifying community partners is, who does the community already trust? So we're thinking about community-based organizations, especially those with maybe a public health focus. We're thinking about nonprofits, churches or faith groups, schools, libraries. Instead of starting from scratch, we can utilize existing relationships and networks like neighborhood organizations or trusted community leaders. Successful community partnerships are built through more than just sharing information. We also need to be thinking about bringing our stakeholders into this process through different roles like outreach or co-hosting events. And UConn Tab is currently finalizing a community liaison guide that empowers community members with the knowledge and tools to become leaders in Brownfields work and engagement. And then Tab's stakeholder analysis and SWOT analysis are also great planning resources to help identify partners and community assets.
So one part of communication is establishing a clear, reliable line of contact. It's not really enough just to share those updates. Community members need to know exactly where they can go when they have questions, concerns, or feedback, and they need to trust that someone will respond. This could be a dedicated email address, a phone number, maybe a contact form online, even a set of office hours to drop in on. What matters most is that it's clearly communicated, it's easy to find, and consistently monitored. When you establish a strong point of contact, you're building trust, creating accountability, and really reducing that confusion. Without it, communication can quietly break down, and not always in a dramatic way, but in ways that reduce engagement over time. So with that, let me give you a realistic example. So imagine you've been sending out regular updates about your Brownfields cleanup project, specifically the remediation and redevelopment of a long contaminated former mill site along a riverfront. And your newsletter has been tracking milestones like site assessments, asbestos abatement, and soil remediation. In your latest update, you mentioned that cleanup activities have been delayed due to the discovery of additional contamination, which now requires a revised remediation plan and additional regulatory review. A local resident reads this update and becomes concerned. They live in a nearby neighborhood and rely on a planned outcome of that project, which is a new riverfront greenway, a pedestrian path that would connect their daily walking route and improve the safe access to the downtown. That delay means that not only is construction pushed back, there may also be extended periods of truck traffic noise, restricted access to the near the site. However, the newsletter doesn't include a clear point of contact. There's no project manager email listed, there's no city department phone number, no link to more updates, and the resident has felt unsure who to reach out to for clarification. They might have questions like, are the contamination risks increasing? How long will the delay last? Will the final redevelopment change? So what happens next? Most people really don't go out of their way to track somebody down. They don't try to call the main number or the main office. They don't search your website. They really just disengage. They may feel frustrated or assume that they won't get an answer anyway. Now multiply that by dozens of people. You don't necessarily hear the complaints, but you lose trust and participation can drop off. Now contrast that with a version that includes a simple line like question, contact this person at this email, or attend our monthly office hours. That small addition lowers the barrier to engagement. It gives people a clear next step. It signals that their questions are welcomed and not an inconvenience. It's also important to think about sustainability. If that contact person is out of office, does the communication stop? We want to try to encourage a shared inbox or a team managed contact to help keep things consistent. And finally, closing that loop does matter. Even a brief response or acknowledgement shows that someone is paying attention. So the key takeaway here is when there's no clear communication, people don't usually escalate, they withdraw, and that's much harder to fix later on. A clear point of contact helps people feel like they're engaged from the start. So when we talk about choosing communication channels, especially for Brownfields projects, the goal isn't just to share the information, it's to make sure that the right people actually receive it and understand it. And think about your specific project. For example, if you're working on a former industrial cleanup, like a mill or gas station property, who is most impacted? It might be a nearby resident, a small business owner, or people who regularly pass through the area. Those groups may not all use the same communication channel. That's why relying on just one method, like a website update or a newsletter, usually isn't enough. Instead, we recommend a layered approach. Yes, maintain your email list and send out those regular updates, but also think about physical visibility, like flyers at the site, notices at the library, or information shared through community partners, like Katie mentioned. Trusted local organizations can be especially effective messengers, particularly in communities where there may be skepticism about government-led projects. Accessibility is also key. Brownfield projects often involve a lot of technical details, things like contamination and cleanup methods, but your communication channels should support clear, plain language explanations. And that includes making sure that materials are translated in different languages when needed and shared in formats that people can actually access. And that's something that UConn Tab can support with. We offer free translation services of documents, scripts, things of that sort. And another important piece is meeting people where they already are. Instead of expecting residents to come to you, bring updates to existing community spaces, like schools, community centers, or local events. And finally, one of the most overlooked elements is, like we mentioned, including a clear point of contact. It can seem redundant, but each flyer or newsletter or post should include some sort of method to reach out for more questions.
So, building upon what Nila was just addressing, um, a lot of brownfields terminology can be very overly technical or unfamiliar. So, when speaking about brownfields projects and funding, our role is to help make information more accessible through plain language. So, this might look like avoiding or very clearly defining that technical jargon, which we'll give some examples of on the next slide. But it's also using shorter sentences, common words, breaking up really text-heavy documents with photos, visuals, headings. Plain language means accessibility for everyone. So, like Nilab was kind of referencing, that might mean translating resources to other languages spoken throughout the community. And like Nilab said, UConn Tab does have services for that. So please feel free to reach out to us after the webinar if you're interested in those. But lastly, we want to focus on what any project updates or information mean for people's health and their communities. So how does this impact community health? How does this impact a neighborhood? How does this impact people's daily lives? We always want to remember who these resources, who these updates are for, and make sure the updates are meaningful in that way. So UConn Tab does have some resources to help with this, to help with all of this, including our fact sheets on common contaminants, common Brownfields acronyms, as well as our Brownfields 101 flyer, which can be, formatted into a lot of different forms and communication methods, but focuses on community-centered education around some of these technical topics. And here are some examples of utilizing plain language when discussing brownfields. If you're discussing or if you're talking about a phase 1 environmental site assessment, you'll want to define it and make sure that you mention that it's a first look at site's history to see if pollution might be present. Going down the list, we hear the word remediation thrown around a lot, so we want to make sure that people know what this means. To clean up contamination at a site. Instead of or in addition to talking about engineering controls, you can clearly state that these are physical barriers that prevent exposure to contamination. A lot of examples here, I won't go through all of them, but these small shifts can make a big difference in building understanding and building trust as well. And then, thank you, Nilab. So consistent and frequent updates. We find that consistency can be one of the bigger challenges when it comes to communication, but sharing frequent and consistent updates is one of the more important aspects of a successful community engagement or communication plan. So we recommend sharing updates on a regular schedule, whether that's monthly, quarterly, whatever frequency makes sense for you, your team, your project. And when possible, aligning updates with project milestones helps to build momentum, build excitement, and then using the same communication platforms consistently, website, email, social media. This is helpful so that people know, oh, my lights just turned off on me, so that people know where to look for information. Updates. Updates should answer simple questions. What's happening now? What's next? And most importantly, provide regularly scheduled updates, even when there is no big news to share. That's the key here. Even something as simple as just sharing as there are no major updates, the project is ongoing, and reminding the public of contact information can help build that transparency and trust with residents that's so important to a holistic, long communication process. So things like this just show the community that a project is still moving forward, even when progress is slow and may not be entirely visible to them.
So really building upon what Katie mentioned here is communicating about your brownfields projects is also willing to share the successes that she mentioned, but also the challenges and if there's no update, of course. So on the success side, this can include those clear milestones that we discussed, like completing that phase 1, starting or finishing a cleanup activity, securing additional funding. Moments like these show your progress and help your community see that the project is moving forward. But it's also important to highlight community involvement. For example, if a resident's feedback helped shape the future reuse of the site, like adding in a green space that was suggested or additional housing that was needed, Maybe safer pedestrian access. Say that explicitly. It reinforces that engagement isn't just a checkbox, but it's a real impact. And at the same time, we know that challenges are inevitable in brownfields work. You might uncover additional contamination, run into funding delays, face construction setbacks, but avoiding those updates can erode trust quickly. Instead, try to be transparent and proactive. Help A helpful framework here is, you'll hear us say this a lot, is the three main things: what happened, what it means, and what's next. For example, if additional contamination is discovered during cleanup, you might explain what was found, whether it changes the risk to the community, and how it will affect the project timeline and the next steps. The tone here really does matter. You want to be honest, but remain calm and solution oriented. The goal isn't to alarm people, but it's to keep them informed and confident that the progress is ongoing, even if there are setbacks. So on that note, let's break down an example from a previous municipal assistance program that recipient that Katie and I actually worked on. And I want to highlight just a few parts that really stand out in terms of communication and community engagement. So the first thing that you'll notice is that the site is clearly identified at the top, and it's not just by the name, but it's also by the address. And it's important because not everybody in the community may recognize the site by its official name. They might know it based on where it's located in their community. And then the content is really organized around key questions that community members actually care about. So what happened here? What contaminants were present? What kind of cleanup has been done, and what's going to happen next? This makes information much more accessible and easier to follow, especially for people who don't have that technical background. Another strong element here is the inclusion of visuals. So on the right, you can see a before photo alongside a work in progress image, and this helps people see the impact of the project and not just read about it alone, which can be much more engaging. Also here, it's clearly explained what the cleanup efforts were in plain language, like things like soil removal, hazardous material disposal, without overwhelming the audience with jargon. And importantly, at the end, what the site will become: a green space for the community. That is future focused. It helps people understand the value and the benefits of the project. And finally, there's a clear area where it says how to get involved. There's a section with the website information, a contact form, and even a QR code for those that might like to use their iPhone to directly get to the link instead of typing it out. And overall, I think this is a pretty great example of how to communicate technical projects in a way that's clear, visual, and community-centered. And this was actually a Facebook post that was used. And Katie will talk about another example.
Yeah, thanks, Neela. Yeah, if you just want to click the link, we're excited to show you guys a story map. Story maps are very new resource that UConn Tab is offering, but a really, really great way to communicate project updates to community members. So this is an example from East Hampton, Connecticut. Um, Again, just really broadly, story maps are awesome for showcasing brownfields information for, whether you have one local site or multiple brownfields properties. Like you can see in this map overview, you can scroll through the sites and see where they are in relation to each other and on a map throughout the community. So, we can also populate these pages with specific site information, like you'll see here. As well as grant information like we're talking about today. So kind of outlining, what funding has been received by a particular community, and discussing some of the work that will be done with that funding. And then at the bottom of the page here, we just have some contact information, a link to a survey where people can leave their feedback on different reuse plans. So all of this is completely customizable. So UConn Tab can help develop a story map that meets the needs of your project, that meets your communication or your engagement goals, and just kind of makes sense for wherever you are in the brownfields process. We can include any information that you see fit. We can update with more information over time as it becomes available. And like you saw briefly at the bottom of the screen, we can create surveys and different tools similar tools like that for getting and obtaining community feedback, answering questions, things like that. Um, so with that, I think we can conclude today's webinar. Thank you all so much for joining us. You can find our contact information on this slide, as well as a link to our tab website that goes through an overview of all of our services. And you can find some of them on the slide here. Just some of our community engagement services that could potentially be helpful in communicating grant progress and updates like we spoke about. So we know this work can feel like a lot. We're happy to be here to support you through your different Brownfields projects however we can. So please don't hesitate to reach out. We're here, we're happy to answer questions. I will stop recording now so that we can open up the floor